Welcome to the Federal. I'm K. Dakshinamurthy. We are continuing our coverage of Sri Lanka and the serious crisis it finds itself in the economically, and it has also caused a lot of anguish to find a neighbor in a neighboring country going through this ordeal. And there is also a lot of questions that are being asked in India as to how this happened. So we have with us Mr. Senthil Thondaman, who is the Vice President of the Ceylon Workers' Congress and the Coordinating Secretary to the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa. Mr. Thondaman was also the former Chief Minister of the UA province. Welcome, Mr. Thondaman, to the show. So, to the talk. So the point here is, what is surprising is it has happened. It seems to have happened in a very gradual manner. And was it not something that the government expected to happen? I mean, how did it come to this pass?
No, actually, the economic crisis never happens over a day. It is a building issue which is being building for a couple of years. But it was very unfortunate that because of COVID crisis, our entire tourism, got standstill. And Sri Lanka is basically a tourist country. We have Sri Lanka's revenue also it depends on the tourism industry. Apart from that, Sri Lanka is a 70 to 80% import-based country. So due to the lockdown throughout the world and the logistics getting affected during the COVID time, only the 20% of the total production in Sri Lanka had to cater the 100% of the population. So there was a very high increase on the prices which were on all products in Sri Lanka. Apart from that, with the stop of the tourist industry, which came to a break, also created a loss of foreign dollar revenue into Sri Lanka. These all combined together at the same time was a sudden hit on the economic crisis, which was being going day by day worse, and one day it had to come to a full stop. That's how this took place.
So what was the situation pre-COVID?
Before pre-COVID, the crisis was not so much affectable, which was affecting the people, which was manageable. The people, the affordability of the people were, yes, even if it was the 10 things which they had to purchase, they were able to manage with 7 and 8. But now after COVID and with this crisis and all that, if they have to purchase 10 things, they are able to manage only 2 things. So the price of the 10 things, 2 things prices has gone up to equal to the 10 things which they were purchasing earlier on the food products and things like that. So I think it's going to be a very difficult task in the coming days for the people who are below the poverty line and the low income families.
Also, what role do you think the policy of this organic fertilizer policy, what role did that play in, if at all, in exacerbating the situation?
No, that dropped to 20% of the produce also. Like what I said, there was only 20% of the produce. And when without proper import of the organic, because Sri Lanka doesn't have so much of organic fertilizers to supply for the entire country's agriculture. So without a proper stock of import of organic agriculture fertilizers, when this ban was imposed, so the total produce, which was producing 20 to 30% of the Sri Lankan agriculture producing products, all dropped because of this organic. So which also created a cost hike in price, which I think the time it was introduced was a wrong time.
Mm-hmm. So,
the methods followed on that was also should have been more accommodative and more friendly with the agriculture people, rather than over a night putting a sudden ban on chemical fertilizers.
Mm-hmm. So does that policy still continue, or is there a rethink on it?
The government continues that policy, but it has now allowed the private sector to import fertilizers which are required apart from organic also. But the government still continues on the organic policy.
Okay. See, also one issue is that the economic crisis has been around, like you say, for since COVID happened and all that. But really, what has woken up, let's say, India is the fact that the refugees have started coming into India. Some 16
Yeah,
refugees
that's right.
people have come in.
That's right.
So,
That's
how
right.
do you see that? Yeah, how do you see this? This desperation. I mean, how do you view this? I mean, what?
No, the refugees who have right now come down to India have already been in the refugee camps in India. So they were living in India and they were around, I think, 2011-12. After the war came to an end, they came down to Sri Lanka and they settled. So they are used to living in India and they know that India economy is stable throughout. And because they still have the connectivity with the refugee camps and all that, and they have the access over there now with this modern technology with the phones and mobiles and things like that, they are still connected with them, and they think that India is a place where we will accommodate them and give them the refugee status. So they took a way forward to flee to India.
Okay, so I was watching a television reportage of the refugees, and some of them are saying that there are more people waiting to come. So, how do you say? So, which means that
Oh,
is there any?
I cannot comment on that because that is it's not an
Yeah,
official
yeah,
report.
correct,
It's a report by a civilian who has
right.
come forward to India. Maybe I don't know. I'm not sure about it. So
Okay,
if for this one, we just took the information about who has gone, what was the reason. Economic crisis is the main reason for them to leave Sri Lanka, but
mhm.
the accessibility they have with India with the camps, health thought that they thought that they will go to India so that they will be able to get back the refugee status and live there in the camps.
So, has there been any similar situation of this nature in Sri Lanka? I mean, a crisis, maybe not to this proportion, but at least almost to this
Yeah,
kind
in
of a situation.
1970s, when Madam Bandaranaike was the ruling party who was leading the ruling party in Sri Lanka, there was a crisis of ban of import. So that time, it have to be again, they tried to be self-sufficient and all that. So that time also they had a failure, which they had to drop the policy and again go for allowing imports to come in. But this time, I think because
Mhm.
of the that time we didn't have a COVID pandemic situation, we didn't have a tourism stopping situation, we didn't have an organic fertilizer situation. So when all these three put together, I think it's a bigger hit than 1970s, which Sri Lanka came across.
Okay. See, one of the issues, around the world, countries that depended on tourism, even in Southeast Asia, you had a lot of countries who have gone through very tough times because of COVID. What kind of a lesson do you think Sri Lanka should learn from this? In the sense that, is it a wise thing to depend on tourism? How do you make sure it doesn't happen again?
No, now actually the government took an initiative of making Sri Lanka self-sufficient. That's why they banned most of the agriculture products which are imported, which can be produced in Sri Lanka itself. So they thought, okay, when you ban those products, and yes, Sri Lanka will start producing its own agriculture crops, which are sufficient for Sri Lankan intake, so that the tourism industry will be an additional value-added industry to Sri Lanka. Otherwise, whatever the revenue which comes under the tourism industry, we use it for the import. The dollars are being used it for the import purpose. So we thought, let's make Sri Lanka self-sufficient, and the steps taken for that, I feel. Should have that's a good policy to making Sri Lanka a self-sufficient country, but it should have based on the circumstances where right now the Sri Lanka is going through. Based on that, they should have planned in a way that it doesn't or not overnight, just by going step by step, I think would have been more effective in getting overcoming this crisis.
Actually, there is a little irony in the sense that, for instance, the IMF may probably step into help Sri Lanka, and also, in fact, there has been a dilemma whether to go for the IMF or not. And I think right now, I think if I'm right, the country is looking at the IMF and getting will probably get some emergency funds to stave off the crisis. But when you go to the IMF and along with it comes conditionalities, wouldn't it affect your long-term goal of self-sufficiency? So I mean, so it also shows that every time you want to be self-sufficient, you are having a issue. So how are we going to handle this now?
No, now the only option to get this situation bailed out is through IMF. That's the only option. The oppositions claim that if we had gone a little earlier, the conditions which would have the IMF would have imposed during the COVID pandemic times would have been more flexible and more in a better way, where Sri Lanka also has more say on it, on the conditions what they do. But now they see, because now we have no other option. The only option when it is IMF, we have to look on the possibilities of exploring the conditions and terms and conditions proposed by the IMF. And the self-sufficiency, yes, we are being trying. See, from 1970, after the import was stopped and again import was let in, the production of all the agriculture products and the fruits and all that have been started building. We've not gone lesser in the production, but the consumption is also equally increased. I think before 1970, fruits and all that, the production compared to today was much lesser. But after this organic was introduced, fertilizer was introduced, the production quantity has dropped. So I think the way it took forward is was one of the reasons for this crisis. And I hope maybe now we will restructure a way to take the forward to make Sri Lanka self-sufficient. Every citizen in Sri Lanka now wants Sri Lanka to be self-sufficient. So it's a duty and responsibility of everybody to do it with personal interest. So, and let's explore the ways where we can make it a successful scheme to make Sri Lanka a self-sufficient country.
The other thing is, do you feel a sense of being let down by China? Because it looks like China really hasn't been very, open to, bailing you out at this time. Because, I'm specifically asking about China because China has also now become an important partner of Sri Lanka. That's why.
Now, Sri Lanka last time during the currency swap and all the other assistance given by China supported with yuan, this Chinese currency. China didn't support us with US dollars. So I think this Chinese yuan can be used only to do some exchange system or make some purchases from China. So, but the entire, like what I said, the 80% of the entire supplies of Sri Lanka doesn't fall from China. Maybe 10 to 15% maximum, I think. So we will be only able to, the support which China gives on the Chinese currency, we'll be able to only cater 10 to 15% of the supplies. So we are looking on a US dollar support. So for which the Indian government has supported us at this crisis time by giving a $1 billion of USD of line of credit. So the support from China was on the Chinese currency yuan. So that didn't make big use for us because it can be used only in China and it's only US dollar is worldwide accepted. So that was the reason why I think the policies and the policymakers didn't move much towards China, because even then they are going to extend. If they are extending something in US dollars, yes, it might be helpful to Sri Lanka. They're going to extend again on the Chinese currency. I think maybe this is not the time for us to go get the lending, which is, the Chinese money, which we already collected, I think on swaps and things still lies here in Sri Lanka. So, so we think that, somebody who supports on US dollar might make some sense to the present crisis.
So how long do you think it will take for the government to now sort out this issue? I mean, any kind of POA you have?
No, even if IMF comes in, it's not going to topple the situation overnight. Maybe it might take a tenure of the government to complete and to bring it back to stage to the stage one which the government took over. And then again to rebuild, I think it will still more take time, and we cannot predict anything with this new COVID pandemic keeping on rising. There are different variants which are coming, and with that you can't predict, because still Sri Lanka is not self-sufficient. Still we are dependent on overseas nations. So if the pandemic comes to an end, at least we can calculate out our policy planning and an economic strategy. But without these natural disasters, when they fall in, we are not able to exactly give a commitment, that we can overcome by this.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Thondaman, for talking. And we wish you all the very best, and hope to see Sri Lanka out of this crisis ASAP. Thank you.
Thank you.